Hello, my name is Cedar Balseji. I'm the co-editor of the Asian Dance Journal, and I'm also on the editorial board of the Korea Journal, based on my experience with serving behind the scenes with these journals and also being a peer reviewer for many years now. I'm going to be sharing some of my tips for being a better peer reviewer. So you can see this is my general approach to an article that I am reviewing. First, I read the title and the abstract. Depending on the abstract, I'm already going to be prejudiced towards either accepting or rejecting the article. If an abstract is well written and interesting, I will keep a mind open to accepting. If the abstract is poorly written, the odds I will reject the article are already quite high. With the abstract, I want to see a clear argument, and I want to know how the research was carried out. I do not want to see excessive jargon or exceptionally long sentences. Next, I scroll to the end of the introduction to read the argument. Normally, it's going to be in the last or the second to the last paragraph of the introduction. If I do not see a paragraph that is clearly stating the argument, probably in similar but expanded language from the abstract, this is another bad sign. But if I do, and the article sounds interesting, the article has passed my second check. If it is not easy to tell what the argument of the article is, it means the writing is poor overall. If an author cannot clearly articulate the point of their research, they're not adequately considering the reader, and they may have approached their topic only out of interest, but without trying to add to the conversation. By reading a couple paragraphs of the introduction, I can generally figure out if this is an interesting article and well written, an interesting article but poorly written, or if it's just a mess. Yes, I believe all introductions must have an argument because academic writing is not creative writing. There's no reason to have a creative structure or withhold information until the end. Although I also look for some statement relating to why an author is writing an article, such as updating or expanding an older work, filling in a gap in the literature, or addressing a changing context, I cringe when authors try to claim some huge significance to their work. Not all research changes the world. I should also be able to easily locate a statement of the research methods used for the article. Next, I scroll through the bibliography. I check the quality of the sources that are used, and I check the accuracy of the format. If someone cannot format a bibliography or doesn't care to get it right, I assume their research will also be sloppy. One of the things I check is language. Usually I'm reviewing articles written in English about Korea, and the two biggest problems are scholars who don't cite anything in English. In that case, I think they should just write in Korean, because scholarly publishing is a conversation, and their scholarship will look poorly to readers who are well read on the topic in English. The other problem is scholars who write about Korea but only cite things written in English. There are relevant sources in Korean, and a scholar of Korea should be reading some of those. Similarly, it's hard for me to understand someone writing about tourism without citing important scholars on tourism, even if it means engaging with a foreign language. However, recycling references to the same dead French theorists that we cited 20 or 30 years ago just because they've been translated into Korean is not my point. As scholars, particularly in the age of AI translation, we can get a fairly good idea about the main point in recent scholarship written in almost any language. Next, I look at source quality. Are they citing a bunch of MA theses or even PhD dissertations? This is a bad sign. Most professors poorly supervise their students' theses. So most theses are essentially a rough draft at best. And some are completely garbage. A PhD dissertation might be slightly better, but it, again, depends on who the supervisor was and how strict that supervisor was about scholarly practices. Again, it's a draft. Are they citing work in high-quality journals or shitty conference papers? Again, a conference paper is a draft. Are they just citing 15 works by the same person? If the same author appears too many times in the bibliography, I check to see if they're looking at that author's work critically. And if not, I'll assume that self-plagiarism may be at work, and I'll try to check for that. Self-plagiarism is easy to fall into, but it should be avoided. Next, how old are their sources? If all the sources are 10, 20, 30 years old for this topic, does it matter? For the articles I review, it usually matters. Old citations mean I'm reading recycled old research. It means the work is based on outdated ideas. At this point, I've already decided to accept with revisions or reject the article. Because I peer review about 20 to 24 articles per year, I don't want to spend too much time on an article that I will reject. I'm not going to keep reading if they failed these previous 3 checks. If I will reject the article, I explain some weaknesses and make sure I've given them ideas for how the author can improve their article next time they submit it. If the article can be accepted, now I need to determine if it needs minor revisions or major revisions by reading it carefully all the way through. Beyond the first 5 steps, here are some additional points. First, language mechanics, including grammar and clarity. In English or in Korean, sometimes people write in these really long, vague, flowery sentences. And frankly, it sounds nice, but it's terribly unclear and a bad habit in academic writing. Academic writing is meant to communicate ideas, not sound pretty. If someone is writing in unclear language, it's poor writing. These days, some of this is caused by the use of AI. There's nothing wrong with saying, this section of the paper sounds very polished, but when I look closely, it has a lot of filler and not much substance. The type of writing we see from AI, you should either delete that section or rewrite it to effectively communicate. When you're reviewing something, sometimes the English or the Korean is not very good. And it can be very sensitive for people to tell them that their language usage is not fluent. Whether it's a revision or a reject, these are my tips. Very few authors can write with perfect grammar and clarity, even in their native language. In particular, as you grow close to a topic and edit a section repeatedly, it can be hard to see the errors. Therefore, you should never tell them to get a native speaker to review their writing. They might be a native speaker. Just simply say that the writing is not polished enough, or that it is too colloquial, or that it is too full of jargon to be easily understandable. Don't mention grammar unless you can mention a specific grammar issue, such as verb agreement or excessive use of passive voice. Most of all, encourage the author to use a professional academic editor. Emphasize that they shouldn't use a friend, but a professional. I use one because a professional academic editor can do a whole lot more than just fix grammar. It can be very helpful to suggest additional reading to the author, but when you do that, it's really helpful to explain exactly why and which idea and which publication would be useful. It's acceptable to recommend that they cite your own paper. This journal asked you to review because they believe that you know this topic very well. But as an editor, when I see a reviewer who recommends citing themselves but not citing any other scholars, I can have some judgmental and unflattering thoughts about the reviewer. And please don't suggest more than a couple titles you wrote. Sometimes everything you wrote is relevant, but keep it classy. Everyone is a different type of reader. For me, it's hard to even understand a paper if there are too many errors in the paper. And reading it closely generally means flagging or even correcting some of the issues, including grammar, wording, word choice, and even sometimes reordering the paragraphs. However, if you read this way, it takes too much time to review the article. Therefore, I try to correct the issues on one page or in one paragraph, and then tell them to fix similar issues throughout the paper. And if there are some errors in terminology or understanding, you need to flag those carefully. For example, here are 3 things that I've definitely said more than once. You keep writing Korean words with a capital letter. Capital letters should be used for names of dynasties, people, and geographic locations, but genres of music or dance or the names of instruments should not be capitalized, just like we don't capitalize ballet or guitar. Either write Hallyu or write the Korean wave, but do not write Hallyu wave. Or Korean words should not be pluralized with an S at the end of the word. Please write hanbok and not hanboks. Finally, we have to keep it positive. Even though we can see some really terrible articles sometimes, it's best to say something nice about any article, imagining you're the one who's going to receive that review result. Especially when you are rejecting an article, make sure to say something about, although I do not think the article is ready at this time, I did find your analysis of X very convincing, and the extensive interviews you conducted represent valuable data for scholars. I hope after revisions to see this article in publication. All right, well, I'm sorry I didn't have more time to make this video presentation super flashy, but hopefully it will be helpful for you going forward as you review articles. Thank you so much for being a peer reviewer. It is a critical part of the scholarly practice.